In this section, we've learned how to create our own lines, either straight lines, curved lines, creating our own shapes. But it's very, very important to learn how to edit the lines and shapes that we create. And in this video, we're going to explore what options we have. And this is a very important part. This is at the heart and soul of digitizing or creating designs, is knowing how to not only create them, but how to manipulate them. And so we're not going to go too much into detail, hopefully, but let's go ahead and get into this. You can see that I have a couple shapes up here. I'm going to go ahead and click my selection tool. And if I click on it, and whenever we're going to edit something, first thing we can click on it, and this brings up our standard options. So let me click on this one so you can see it a little bit better. But it's going to give us height, width, and it's going to give us options around it. If I just click and drag it, I can make something larger or smaller. That's basic editing, right? Resizing. And you're going to rotate it a little bit. That's just your basic functionality. But when I'm talking about editing designs, I'm really talking about going into the shape edit. So if you have the tools around your object, when you select it, you can click right here, or you can go up here to shape edit and click on it. And what happens at that point is it's going to show you the lines and the nodes or the points for each object. And this is where we start really editing and manipulating, is at this point. And this is the advanced editing, I should say. So when it comes to editing shapes, it's just like almost like anything else. We can go and we can click on a point and we can drag it and put it wherever we want. If we want to reshape something, just a section of something, we can do it this way. If I click on the line, it's going to actually bend it or curve it, as you see here. So, and from here, if I click on a point, you'll notice that on this one, I don't see any handlebars. And by handlebars, I mean this. When I click on this one, notice that I get this little handlebar here. It's important to understand when you get them and when you don't. If you're working with a straight line, and how I know that this is a straight line node or point is I can look right up here and it says it's a line. This is one of the great things about having the floating toolbar, is it's interactive. If I click on this one, it's going to show me that it's actually using a cusp. And a cusp allows you to have a straight line and a curved line, or different angles coming from this point. If I click on this one, you'll see it'll be a cusp as well. Okay, so that's why I get the handlebars, is because I'm dealing with either a cusp, a smooth, or symmetrical. If I'm dealing with a straight line like this one, I don't get any handlebars because it's just a straight line. It's just going to, as I click and drag this around, it's just going to be attached to the other 2 points, and it's going to allow me to move it. But if I click on one of these that has a curve coming from the point, now all of a sudden it's going to still move the same way, but now I get the option to actually move these points, or the angle of the line. So it's just important to understand what that is and how that works. So we've learned how we can click and drag the points, and we can drag the lines and make them more curved into a different shape, and we can move it all around. I'm just clicking and holding and get it to where I want it. And by adding a curve to a line, now when I click a node that's attached to it, I'm going to get the handlebars. If I don't have a curve, straight line, I don't get those little handlebars. And so now let's take a little bit more of a look at things. So now if I click on this point right here, let's do this one instead. If I click on this point and I right mouse click, now you're going to see the options that I have. First of all, this where it says edit and it says all It's just basically outlines. If this was an embroidery file, I'd maybe have angle lines and different things. But because I'm just working with artwork, that's the only option. I can add a point on a line. I can insert points before or after. This is really cool. This is a newer feature of the software within the last year, and being able to insert points before and after is a pretty cool thing for editing. I can delete a point, so I could delete that point. If I click right there, you can see it goes away. I can change the type of a node or point that it is. This one's a line point, straight coming in and out. I can change it to a cusp, smooth, symmetrical. So we'll explore this. I can split the line right there, which is another cool feature. So these are all things you can do if you click on a node. So what happens if I click on the line as opposed to the node? You'll see that it's different because I don't have a node selected. Now I can add a point, but you can see this stuff grays out, and I can split it, but that's it. So it's important to know that if you want to change the type of a point it is, or if you want to get all the editing capabilities for a point, you need to make sure you click on the point itself. Okay, so let's go and look at a few of these things. I'm going to click this point. I'm going to right click. And the first thing I'm going to do is talk about these. The line, the cusp, smooth, and symmetrical. I'm going to choose cusp first. And you'll notice that it didn't really do anything. It doesn't look any different, right? It's very similar to a line node at this point because I haven't bent or curved it. So let's right click on it again and instead choose smooth. So when I choose smooth, it's important to understand how smooth works. With smooth, it's different from symmetrical because if I click and drag one handlebar, notice that I can make this handlebar really long and I can move it around. But notice that the handlebar on the other side, meaning this one right here, doesn't change. It stays exactly the same. It might move around, but the distance keeps identical. That's important to know about a smooth node or point. Now I am right clicking to change it, but just know that if I select this, I can come up here and click one of these as well. So this time I'm going to choose symmetrical. And when I choose symmetrical, it changes a little bit. So when I click on this point, notice that these are the exact same distance apart. Watch what happens when I move this one, what happens to this side. It keeps it symmetrical, meaning it's going to move it the same distance as the one you're dragging. That's very important to know because when you're editing a design, sometimes you'll want it symmetrical, but there's a lot of times where you'll want it to just be a smooth node because you'll want to actually be able to control and bend one side more than the other. So that's the difference between line. If I go to between smooth and symmetrical, now if I go to cusp, watch what happens. Because I already have something that's already curved, what happens at this point with cusp, you saw with smooth and symmetrical that if I moved this one this way, this one moved that way. They kind of moved in tandem along a straight line. And with cusp, it's different. It's going to actually treat the line on one side independent of the other. So if I click and drag this one's not going to move at all. It's going to stay where it is. See how that works? So let me change it to smooth. And again, I'm just looking at this one right there. That point right there as I move this one. If I move it to smooth, now I click, notice that it moves, keeps that straight line between them. So cusp allows you to really come in, and I can make this one straight, kind of more straight to this line here, and bend this one. So it's just important to understand how nodes work, and so you just need to play with them. Again, you're not going to break anything, so don't worry about doing that. Now, if I want to get this back out of like a curved shape, I can click on it, right click on that point and go to line. The moment I do that, it's going to make it a line on both sides of this point. So both sides are going to now be a line. Now, a cool thing that you can do, I'm going to select this one. I'm going to click and drag over those 3 points. See that? I have all 3 of them selected at once. This is something that you can do. Now I can right click and choose line, and it's going to straighten each of those lines out. Pretty cool, huh? So now if I come into this one and I select all of these, if I right click and choose smooth, it's going to smooth all of them. See how this kind of works? It's a very, very powerful features inside the software with working with nodes. Is just you can select multiples at one time and change the type of point. So you can see right here, if I wanted to make a puzzle piece that was like that, you could see how easy it is to do it. I just create a bunch of straight points and then choose and then convert them all to symmetrical. And you can see that it's actually creating a very clean lines moving around. So play around with this. You're not going to break anything, and you always have undo. So that's how you can change the point or the node type. So what else can we do? So let's say that I no longer want this to be a closed shape, because let's say that I want to actually have no line in between here, right? Because maybe I'm going to add something to it. So what I can do is I can click on this node right here, and let's just look at what our options are up here. We have split line, we have a slice tool. What we're going to do is actually we're going to split the line. Now I can click this icon, or I can right click here, and I can choose to split the line right here. Okay, so it exists in both places. If you don't want to right mouse click, use that. And I usually will use these. So it doesn't look any different. I did click split line, but you don't see any difference. But watch what happens. As I click and move that away, it's no longer attached. I split it at that point. I told it I don't want it to be combined anymore. This now, I could take this one, and one of the other options you have, as you see here, is I can delete that point. So now I have that point deleted. Now, let's say that I do need to manipulate this a little bit more, but I'm missing some points. Like I need to come down, up, and over. What you can do is now I can right click on one of these and I can choose to insert a point before or after. Now, in order for this to work, you have to know if it's what direction it's kind of going. So if I do insert points before, I can come in here and I can click some points and right mouse click, and let's just take a look at that. You can see that it actually put it after it, right? Because the direction, this will make sense here in a second. And delete these points. And select this one, and instead I'm going to choose after. I think I did before first. So now look at that. Now it actually insert points along that line. And I clicked as many as I wanted. So now I could come in and I could really adjust the shape. Now I can do it one at a time. I can add another point right here by right mouse clicking and choosing add point. The other option is I can double click it. Just double click anywhere on the line and it will drop one there. Now look at this though. It made it a curve, right? So I just deleted it by hitting delete on my keyboard. I'm going to choose to add point, and you'll see that it adds it, always adds it as a curved or symmetrical node. Let's see what type it is. It is a smooth node. And so I can choose line to get it back to a line, but all of these points right here, Well, these that I added were all created as smooth, so I need to put them all to align so that I could make this shape. I'm just showing you that these are the different options that you have. When you right mouse click, you can add points, you can split lines. Now the other thing I can do is I can close it. This wasn't an option before because it already was a closed shape. So if I close the line, now it's going to connect the two open areas. So now it's a closed shape. And now I can fill it with color. I can convert this to a run stitch. It'll go all the way around. Whereas before, we had a little gap. So you can do a lot with editing doing this right mouse click options here. So that is, we've covered all of these: adding a point, deleting, inserting before, after, deleting points, changing the nodes, splitting the line. There's a lot that you can do right here with it. Now, the other things that we can do, we talked about this before when we were actually creating shapes, is we used the grid and we used guidelines and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and turn on the grid. Now, I can come in here now and choose to snap to grid. And even though I'm in the edit mode, notice that it's snapping. So I use this quite a bit to clean up shapes and make sure that everything lines up the way that I want it to. And all I had to do was just bring up the grid and I can do that. Now, sometimes you might need the line to be like right here, and that's when the grid isn't going to be as handy for you. So you could right click and turn off the snap to grid. And the other option you have is to then instead do snap to guidelines. So on a guideline, if I wanted it to be right here, I could just draw this guideline, make this little intersection, and now it will snap. You can see it snaps right to that area. So I can get it right where I want. I can keep it snapped on this line. See how that works? As I'm moving it off a little bit, it's wanting to go back and snap to it. That just helps me keep a nice vertical line there. So you can see how you can use the grid and guidelines as well in actually cleaning up the artwork. And one other thing that I want to show you, because I just feel like it's important to bring up, is that we've been using the artwork tool this whole time. A lot of times when I'm creating something, even if it's going to be for artwork, a lot of times I use the run stitch, and I just want to show you guys why I do that as opposed to using the artwork tool for most things. If I grab this node and drag it down, I not right mouse click, but if I click on the node and if I make it into symmetrical, notice that if I click on it and I drag it, notice how the handlebars go away once I release it. Okay. If I come down here and I convert this to a running stitch and I go into edit mode, I'm still seeing the same basic line right here, right? When I click and drag this, notice that the handlebars don't go away. I can still manipulate it. I don't have to go back and click on the node again each time. So if I'm really trying to tweak something, and I'm really wanting to get it in the shape I want, it's actually easier to do that with the running stitch tool. Now, if you need it to be artwork, that's okay. Create it as a run stitch and just come down here and convert it to artwork. And now it's artwork again. So I've just found editing using the run stitch as opposed to the artwork tool is actually easier to work with. The handlebars stay there. So watch, if I take this and I can convert it to a run stitch, if I'm really trying to tweak this area here, now the handlebar stays active, and I need to do one that has two curves here. I can move one side, then grab the other a little bit, and you can see this one's symmetrical, so I'll change it to smooth so I can really affect it a lot different. But you can see how that is pretty nice. So watch what happens when I change this back to artwork and I go to that same area, just to kind of show you. I have it selected and I move one point here, move this line, and notice that the handlebars go away. Now I have to click it again to adjust this side. And I might have to click it again to extend this one a little bit more. You see what I'm talking about? So that's something that you might want to consider, is using the run stitch to trace things and then converting it to artwork. And that's just something that I've learned that I utilize quite a bit. And so you want to make sure that you play around with editing the shapes and the outlines and knowing the different things that you can do. And before I leave, I want to show you one other thing that might shed some light on working with these tools in editing. So let me go ahead and create a new page here. I'm going to bring up the grid and I'm going to do a snap to grid here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to click a few points. I'm going to make sure that they're very symmetrical or along the same line. And I'm going to right click here. And now I'm going to go to edit. So if I want to make something that kind of curves nicely, I can come up here. I could drag this one up. I could drag this one down a couple. You kind of see what I'm talking about there. When I have like this grid and I have it like kind of attaching to the grid, it's going to make it easy for me now to come in here, right click and choose symmetrical. And you can see that it's going to actually allow me to adjust that line but keep it very clean. So a lot of times if you're wanting to create something that's like a wave that goes straight across, the best way to do it is just to use the grid and create a bunch of points and then change the ones at the top, the ones along the upper line and the lower line to symmetrical, keeping these all straight lines, not changing these points here, but only the ones on top and bottom. And it can allow you to create a nice little wave or a line that bends, that's repeated. It's just a way of working with the lines and manipulating them to get the look that you want and to get it as clean as you possibly can, because that's the name of the game, is getting clean artwork. Clean artwork converts over nicely to embroidery, and it's very helpful when you're actually using a cutter machine as well. So I hope that this whole section was helpful for you in creating shapes and manipulating them, and just play around. And in the next video, I'm going to show you a little bit further about some of the things that you can do with shapes and editing them. And it's not creating the lines or anything, it's more of what you can do when you combine things together and how you use tools like combine and trim and things like that. So we'll see you in the next video.